Everybody, welcome back to the show. We have got with us tonight accomplished author, man, just into the paranormal hauntings. I mean, prolific author. I mean, he is, I want to say it's at least 15, 16 books that he has written. Richard Estep is with us tonight. We're going to be talking about his book, Serial Killers, plus touching on some of his other works like Gacy's Ghost and some of his haunting things. This is going to be a great show. Looking forward to it. Welcome to the Three Beards podcast. My name is Craig, along with Austin and Chris.
Passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century.
Let me out.
I'm afraid that is right. I need then live to send the innocent to their death? Is this justice and honor in Massachusetts colony?
All right, we are back. Now, this time I would like to welcome to the show Richard Estep. How are you, sir?
I am good, Craig and Chris. How are you guys?
Wonderful. Good. Yeah, sorry. I'm like, Austin's on, it's his birthday, so he's off right now. He's normally the one doing producing. I couldn't get the show to launch. I'm like clicking the intro over here. I'm like, click, come on.
I'm wondering why there are only two beards. I feel like there's a traits descriptions issue.
I know. Well, we're just going to take, we'll just pretend you have a heavy 5 o'clock shadow, and we'll call you the third one. Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. No, this is what we kind of touched on serial killers last week for the first time, and that was one luckily we had it all planned out with this book for you, The Minds, Methods, and Mayhem of History's Most Notorious Murders, Serial Killers, right here. This book for everybody, I really recommend this one, especially for people that are just kind of into the overall topic, because this one covers, you have everything from Richard Ramirez to Ted Bundy, the Zodiac killers. The one that we really want to talk, because you touched on a few from history, and this is one I'd never heard of before, the Giggling Granny. And that was one where I was like, I wanted to get you on that one, because that one's just even the name. It doesn't seem like a serial killer name that you'd give somebody, the Giggling Granny.
It's pretty memorable though, isn't it? And there's this misperception out there that there are no or practically no female serial killers. Now, the truth is the vast majority of them are male, absolutely. But there are some female serial killers out there if you look, and she was one that I found particularly fascinating. So, yeah, she had to go in.
Yeah, what was the part that drew you the most to that story on her? Because I would have to say, it was, I don't know, she just had, it's just even from the time period, it's just like everything about her story just really didn't fit.
Yeah, well, what was interesting to me, I think you say grandmother or granny, and you think of comfort. Everyone loves their granny for the most part. I certainly miss mine. And so the idea of someone who is so trusted, someone that is supposed to be, comforting and sweet, who is actually a murderer. Yeah, she looks like, just your average everyday sweet kind of senior citizen. Just so happened that people she knew tended to die off under very mysterious circumstances.
Wow.
Yeah, Black Widow. Basically, it's just And
except she killed her own grandkid too, right after it was born. So, what possesses somebody to do that?
Yeah, because even her mugs, like I said, I'm taking these are all out of the book, by the way, people. This is, even her mugshot. I mean, it doesn't have that normal, like Dorothea, you know, from the where they're in, I think was it Sacramento? Was that in California? Dorothea is it Puente? She's the one that killed. She had all those people come in. They were living off of they had all their Social Security. Is that supposed to be sent to her?
Yeah.
Yeah, and where she basically drugged them, killed them, took them outside, and buried them right there in the yard.
That's right, the boarding house kind of thing.
Yeah, the boarding house. Yeah,
absolutely crazy, isn't it? It's just unbelievable. And to me, the killings and the details of the murders and things of that nature are interesting, but it's the why. What is it about these individuals that makes them the way they are? That's what I'm fascinated by. Are they born that way? Are they made that way? Or is it a combination of the two?
Yeah, the nature versus nurture type, is the case where it's always up. Because there's some of them you'll see, like there's some people, probably like Sam Little is one, Richard Ramirez is another, where these ones are clear cases where they had a horrible childhood. And you could tell. I mean, these were cases where these. I mean, we just talked about. God, his name's. It was Joseph Paul Franklin. We just talked about him, the white supremacist killer. That was he went through. These ones are where just their upbringing. You can see these are ticking time bombs. That if there was a way to go back and just, I mean. If you had, I guess now with metadata, you'd have so much easier time. But if there's some way to have like all these things, but I mean, does that take us into a severe, fascist state, where we got all this information being logged to figure out who's going to be a potential serial killer?
Well, and you have to look at all of the children that have these awful or worse upbringings and do not become serial killers. I mean, one that springs to mind for me is David Goggins, if you're familiar with him. Guy had a horrific childhood and went on to become a Navy SEAL and renowned athlete and things of that nature. So if they use their powers for good or for evil, then you're going to see two very different end products. And how much of that is choice and how much of it isn't? How much is predestined? That fascinates me, quite honestly. Yeah,
I don't. I was looking through here. I mean, I grew up in Oregon, so Ted Bundy was a big one over there. As was I'm trying. There was the other name. God, there was another one that was there in Oregon. That was another big one. I'm growing up, and his name's failing me right now. He was actually in prison. I think they're in Salem, in the state penitentiary. Those ones are cases where it's just close to home, and everybody, I mean, like here we've moved down to Florida and just find out that Joseph Paul Franklin was arrested in Lakeland, which is a half hour from where we live. And you see how close you are to some of these sites, and you're just like, man, this is, a lot of things they go through. And it's like you said, what have you, through your research and go through, have you started to pin to anything that seems to be like a commonality? Like there's like something that's this would be a common trigger. Like if we can start noticing these things, I mean, I know the abuse to animals is
that's a classic sign, isn't it? And not abuse and a desire to torture and that sadistic streak. Also bedwetting beyond the age where that would be considered normal, especially boys. They wet the bed far beyond the age at which that would be expected. And something else that struck me about a number of them is that quite a lot of them were mama's boys, The very opposite of what we talk about when we talk about these neglectful childhoods. Their mothers kind of placed them on a pedestal and they could do no wrong. They were the golden child. That also seems to be a factor. But there is no one thing which unites them all. There is no one single factor that we can point to. Just a number of suggestive characteristics.
I know there's a similarity. Like somebody posted on, and I saw it. Like one, Libra's not in there. I mean, all the zodiac signs of serial killers, it is the major ones, and it seems to be like there seems to be a commonality. Like there's a certain 3 or 4 where a majority of these serial killers all fall under the zodiac sign.
I mean, the argument there would be though there is always going to have to be a zodiac sign that a number of them fall under, right? If you take, so I don't know how much credence I put in that theory. I think it's such a complex and convoluted issue. You have to take it almost on a case-by-case basis. What fascinates me is if you put child A through certain circumstances in life, they're born into a certain family at a certain time, a certain place, and they are subjected to certain conditions. Child B, who experiences things very similar, does not go on to become a serial killer. Well, what is the difference? What is it about child A that made them susceptible to this? I've often wondered if there aren't far more people out there that are susceptible to being murderers than we realize, but they just kind of never get that push, thankfully, or they never snap as some of them do and kill somebody. Because there are several cases that I wrote about in which the first murder was accidental or was believed to be accidental. And then the serial killer realized, or the soon-to-be serial killer realized, hey, I got away with this. Nobody missed this person. The cops didn't figure it out. Nobody's breaking down my door. And I kind of liked it. Maybe I'll do it again. And, you know, you see that also. So I think the potential is probably more widespread than we really realize.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, because as you're saying that was the thing. I was just going to bring that up too. It's just where, you know, these cases where siblings that grow up in the same abuse, the same everything here, and one becomes a serial killer and the other one becomes a counselor.
Yes,
and actually helps people through it. You know, and how are you able? How is that individual? And that's where one of those I'd really like to see, almost like an in-depth study, is how did this person overcome this to the point to where they're helping people, and the other person is going on a stabbing spree and just killing everybody that they, you know, at will. It's really, that's part to me that's been the most fascinating. I was like reading through these things. It's
a very valid point, and I think it's one that we as a society and a culture really need to address, because you look at the number of rage crimes out there, you know, the number of mass shootings, the number of cases in which people just seem to snap. What can be done to derail that? What can be done to mitigate it? And I see April's comment about Eileen Wuornos. And I did write about Eileen extensively. And a lot of the narrative here comes from the Hollywood version of her story, Monster, the film in which Charlize Theron played her. And of course, it was an incredible performance by Charlize Theron. But the narrative there was that Eileen was 100% a product of abuse, and that she was doing what she was doing not because she enjoyed it, but to seek, you know, to get some of that rage out against men that abused her. And yet Eileen Wuornos admitted on more than one occasion she murdered some of those men purely because she wanted to, because she could, because she wanted to rob them, including the guy that she shot in the back. You know, so it's a little tougher to defend that. And I'm not saying that she didn't experience terrible treatment. I believe she did and deserves sympathy for that. But there are many, many individuals that experience that level of treatment that don't go on to murder people. So what made her different? What was it about her makeup and her circumstance?
And for me, that's one of the things that's amazing about a lot of the, especially because you don't see a lot of female serial killers, is because of that. The violence that's inherent in some of these things. You don't see the actual, you'll see something like the Dorothea point, that you see those ones where it's through drugging, it's through something like that. You don't see this level, like Eileen, you don't see the violent side. And that's one of the things that's really surprising whenever you have it, because it's such a shocking thing. It doesn't normally occur.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I know there is a perception out there that males tend to kill more by trauma, by guns, by blades, by brute force, and that women don't. But there are exceptions, and Eileen Wuornos was definitely an exception to that.
Then another historical one, which is crazy, and I don't know if a lot of people in Chicago, H.H. Holmes. That is one that is crazy. Hotel of Murder.
Except when you start to delve into the Holmes story, a lot of the claims about him were inflated by the press at the time. You know, and this is a timely subject, isn't it? When nobody trusts the media anymore. Now, Holmes was a serial killer, undoubtedly. I mean, he killed multiple victims. What I found interesting about him, at least from my research, is that he appeared to remove those who were obstacles to getting what he wanted. I don't think H.H. Holmes was killing people because he enjoyed it. He wasn't sadistic. He wasn't a torturer. Mr. Mudgett, there as it was his real name, was killing people who got in his way and got between him and what he wanted, which was often cash and independence. This whole thing about the murder castle being designed, though, to hide all of these bodies at the World's Fair and things of that nature, the evidence doesn't quite support it from what I've seen.
Yeah, and he's also one of the ones, too, that has the rare accomplice.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's
accomplices aren't that rare, actually. When you see male-female serial killer duos, what you tend to find is that the male is the dominant partner, the one that is kind of the driving motive force, and the female is the one that is either starstruck by the male or is the less dominant of the two. Now, if you look at Fred and Rosemary West, who I write about in the book, in the Cromwell Street House of Horrors, for many years it was believed that Fred West was behind the murders, that he was the one that was, wanted to kill those poor girls. They murdered a lot of girls and buried them beneath their home and beneath their garden. Well, as things turned out, it appeared that his wife, who was playing the "I was forced to go along with it, I was ignorant of much of this" card, was by far the more sadistic and brutal of the two. When witnesses started talking, they described her as horrifically sadistic, and that she was the dominant personality there.
Yeah, and that's getting the picture. That's right. That's the first basic chapter in the book. That's them, if everybody could see. Yeah, that's cool. That everybody's just it's got pictures showing things how they went through, and that's we talked a little bit before we went to show is Sam Little. That's a new series that's out on Netflix. For anybody who watched that one, that one's fantastic as well too. But you talk about that in the chapter. Here is probably the most prolific serial killer, and I don't know if we will ever know just how many he did in fact kill. They think 93. Yeah,
I don't know that he remembers. Remembered, I should say, at all. So we will probably never know.
And it's one of those, for me, he's probably one of the ones to me that seems more, I think one of the more brutal, one of the more just creepier ones, the fact of just how much he enjoyed the feel of like the neck and stuff as he was squeezing, and he loved to see the hemorrhaging in the eyes as he would choke them and suffocate them.
Yeah, if I recall, Samuel Little hit one of his victims so hard he broke her back.
Yep.
Well, he was a very physically imposing man, and very much enjoyed that. One of the commonalities that many of them have in common is this willingness to prey on those who are on the fringes of society, the margins of society. So the homeless, drug users, sex workers, people of that nature. And I think that's why he went undetected for so long. Yeah,
that's what I was just going to say. I mean, because a lot of these people is like, well, why didn't anybody notice this? Well, who's going to notice when the local street prostitute suddenly goes missing? Nobody's other than their friends are going to know it, but the police aren't going to do anything because they're like, this happens all the time. A street worker goes missing. I mean, they can't, there's nothing they can do because nobody's going to talk to them and give them tips.
Yeah, one of the more disturbing cases that I worked, firstly as a paranormal investigator, was a place called Fox Hollow Farm in Indiana, which was the home of the I-70 Strangler, and I wrote a book about that called The Horrors of Fox Hollow Farm with Rob Graves, my co-author. And Herb Baumeister, the I-70 Strangler, was killing gay men. Thanks very much for bringing that up. Mm-hmm. Was killing gay men during the 1990s. And back then, nobody was really interested at first in missing gay men. It was just assumed that they had moved on to another town or disappeared or something of that nature. Nobody really assumed foul play at all. And that's how he kept getting away with it. But you find many of the serial killers, they're looking for people that will disappear. Gacy picked his first victim up at a bus station, for example, kid that was making a bus connection and traveling cross country. So it's easier than ever and harder than ever at the same time to disappear in modern day America and the UK, the Western world. So it's if we leave phones aside for a minute, it's scary how many people just disappear off the map and are either never looked for or are reported missing but just never found.
Yeah, and it's, Gacy, you brought him up too. It's how could you already have the phobia of clowns, and now you add the serial killer mixed in with it. I mean, that is just it's it's thing of nightmares.
Yeah, and Gacy said famously, clowns can get away with murder, and of course he was. So
yeah,
thoroughly vile man, absolutely awful. And the paranormal aspects of that case, when I was working on it, were quite fascinating and disturbing. Also,
I don't know if you.
Oh, you're sorry, Chris.
I don't know if you've thought too deep into this. Do you think there's a lot more serial killers that just haven't been caught? Because if you look on the missing report all the time, there's either females that look alike that's missing, or little kids that kind of resemble each other's missing. Do you think there's more serial killers that they just don't want to link together? I mean, if they kill once a year or they kill every other 2 years, but these people are still adding up missing and nobody ever finds these people.
There's no question about that whatsoever. There are absolutely numerous serial killers out there that are not being caught and may never be. Generally speaking, they kill until they are unable to do so anymore. So, for example, perhaps they become old enough, they become too physically frail to do it, or they end up in jail for something else. That's not uncommon either. But it's rare that they simply lose the taste for it. Some of them will go for years, if not decades, between murders, having the semblance of the normal life, but they usually come back to kill again while they can. One of the things that people found so frightening about the Zodiac case is that the Zodiac murders just stopped. And to this day, we don't know if the Zodiac killer died of a heart attack or was in a car crash or just got too old to do it, or maybe it's that guy sitting next to you on the bus or the train. We will never know, I think.
I think the funniest one is where people that say it's Ted Cruz. He's not even old enough.
Ted Cruz is the Zodiac killer?
Yeah, there's people that say, yeah, and I don't even think it's like, how old would you have had to have been to create do the first one? I mean, it's like we're talking elementary school.
I heard that, but I debunked that. I didn't even think. I didn't even.
Yeah,
you brought that up, and I'm like, Ted Cruz.
Yeah, it's one of those crazy theories. I'm like, I don't think that works.
I'm sure Ted has lawyers, so I don't think he's the Zodiac killer. But I mean, whoever it was had some working knowledge of cryptography. And we just had one of those puzzles decrypted recently, for example, supposedly would tell us the killer's name and didn't, because shockingly the Zodiac liked to lie about things. I do not think they will ever uncover his identity now definitively.
We just caught a guy several years ago in Tampa that they tracked him down due to like DNA of one of his ancestors. He was a serial killer out of Tampa, if I recall, and he was actually a law enforcement officer, so he knew the ends, he knew when they were looking, he knew all the details of the case. I'd have to let me see if I can find his name while we're talking.
Absolutely, I think as DNA, the science of DNA evidence advances, absolutely, we are going to see some more cases being solved. But you also need a good degree of luck. As hard as law enforcement officials can work, you need a healthy dose of luck in some of these cases, especially when the trail is cold and has been cold for decades. Sometimes it takes a real, stroke of luck, in addition to hours upon hours of diligent work in order to catch that break.
Yeah, obviously, everybody talks about Jack the Ripper. I mean, I'm sure you've heard, the theories behind, where there's people have written several books, like where it's my great grandfather, they live in Texas.
H.H. Holmes, yeah, absolutely. I think Jeff Mudgett, who is Holmes's great grandson, believes that Holmes was Jack the Ripper.
And do you think there's any really, because when I was reading that story, that was the one for me that seems to have a little bit of validity to it, is for the fact that he was frequent to travel.
I mean, it's entirely possible. What's interesting about the Ripper murders, is that, again, they stopped very suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
Did the killer go overseas? Did the killer, end up in jail for something else? Was the killer killed? Who knows? But that's the great. I'm careful about how I word this because it's too easy to sound sensationalist and enthusiastic. But
yeah,
the most intriguing crimes are the ones in which the killer was never caught, and there is endless speculation. For example, I researched the Villisca axe murders. I wrote an entire book about that house and that case. And the Villisca axe murder story was so big when it occurred, it knocked the Titanic off the front page of American newspapers. And it was this idea that you are home in your bed, you're fast asleep, you should be as safe as you can be anywhere in the world, and somebody can walk into your house, take your axe, and can murder you and your entire family in their sleep and get away scot-free. And to this day, we do not know who committed the Villisca axe murders. There is a great theory backed up by a lot of evidence that it was a traveling killer who was riding the rails, was traveling from village to village on the train and was killing families like the Moors who he murdered in Villisca. But we still don't know, and the odds are good that we never will. And it's that whole we just don't know factor that keeps this endlessly fresh and fascinating for many of us.
Yeah, Chastity was just like, no one's really talking about it. It's black women being found missing in bodies of water. I think it wasn't that the one. Wasn't that down in Atlanta, in Georgia? Isn't that the one where they're being tossed off of a bridge?
I heard about that. I think that was in Atlanta somewhere.
Is that the one? Is that the one? I'm not sure if that's. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, Richard.
I'm not familiar with that one. I have to look into that.
The one I was talking about was the Seminole Heights serial killer out of Tampa, Florida. Okay.
I'm not familiar with that case. Having written a book about serial killers, you'd think I would know a lot more of them, but there are so many.
Oh, yeah.
And the definition is kind of interesting to me as well. I mean, for example, just a couple of weeks ago, I was in St. Joseph, Missouri, and I was in Jesse James's house on the anniversary of his murder. And if you look at the Old West, a lot of the outlaws especially would qualify to be called serial killers because of the number of people that they killed. So, I think this is a phenomenon that's been with us under a slightly different guise throughout much of history.
And as popped up, I just remembered it's Jerry Brudos.
Okay.
That was who was when I was growing. That was the other one that was located, that was housed, there in Salem, Oregon, and he died, back in 2006. But yeah, I think he was convicted of 4 murders. But yeah, that was the one I was talking about. For me, that's always been the age-old question. I mean, I know you've done a lot of this, and I want to have you get into some of your paranormal stuff because that's really fascinating as well too, based off these. But just do you think that they're ever going to really come up with something that's going to be, almost like a profile? Because profiling keeps getting more and more to where it's going to be easier to spot the ones that can have this potential than, but like I said, without getting into the police state, where everybody's information's gone through. I mean, do you think that's ever going to come about, or is it going to unfortunately it's always going to be, how do we stop them before they kill again?
I think it's, as technology advances, when we start looking at things like, can you be genetically predisposed to this?
Mm-hmm.
Are there certain genetic markers in the same way that there are genetic markers for predisposition to heart disease or diabetes or you name it? That's an intriguing possibility, isn't it? But I think so many factors need to align when it comes down to profiling. The chat is talking about this a little bit, or is at least alluding to it. I almost wonder if AI algorithms, which sift through huge amounts of data very quickly, doctors now use them to help guide treatment modalities, in fact. Will we have AI algorithms that look at crimes and bodies that are found without explanation and things of that nature, have certain reports of domestic violence and things like that? Are there algorithms that will tie them together and help predict that a serial killer is operating in a certain area? And I think that's entirely possible as computer science advances, that we might see something along those lines.
Yeah, as you were saying, that was making me think too. So do you think there needs to be a set standard, guidelines to where when you're coming, like the Emmys, when your coroners, when they show up to do the investigation on when a body's found, to where there's certain data points that have to be collected and made sure they're put in here for cross-sharing, so that way this database can work efficiently?
That could make a great deal of sense. I mean, for example, I talked about the Fox Hollow case earlier. Herb Baumeister, who was believed, I should say, the alleged killer, despite the fact that there was never any suspect, Herb Baumeister was never tried because he shot himself in the head when the police raided his home. So the alleged serial killer, Herb Baumeister, it turned out that he made a lot of business trips along I-70, and the bodies of young men kept turning up at the side of the road along I-70 when he was on those trips. Those murders stopped when he bought the house called Fox Hollow Farm, and then he started killing at home. So, is there a way to look at the fact that murders start and stop, and then disappearances start within a certain geographic distance? That's for a much better educated individual than me to say, but the way that artificial intelligence is developing so quickly, in the era of big data, we have the ability to crunch a lot of numbers very quickly. I would be amazed within a few years if we don't have some serious help on the detection and analysis front from AI.
Yeah, because I was thinking, because like Paranormal Investigations, where you have like the laser grid systems, to where something like that, where you set it in the room, and it's almost like the sci-fi thing. It does a complete scan, so where like to us, it wouldn't really make that big of a deal. But like, say we'll just use say like you're the trained person you're looking for, you're going to be, okay, I'm looking behind you, and I see all these helmets are here, but there's one that this is a guy that's meticulous with every other thing. This one's skewed a little bit. And to where it would pick up on stuff like that, where the normal police investigation, they're not going to pick up on stuff. They're going to take pictures. They're going to go through here, but that might be the one to key that this guy may fit the guy that goes through and subtly makes, changes something. It's like, like for an OCD type thing, just like that's their calling card.
You went. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, something else. We might see flags when certain retailers sell certain materials together. If you're buying a whole lot of duct tape on Amazon, and three sets of handcuffs, maybe that's not for date night. I'm being a little bit flippant, but not entirely. We know that detectives look for certain suspicious patterns of purchases, and hardware stores, serial killers, buy a lot of disposal materials at hardware stores. I don't have expertise in the specifics of this, but it's all about pattern recognition, isn't it, at the end of the day? Yeah. And I will say that our ability to gather data at this point in human history is better than it has ever been before. And our ability to sift it and find something meaningful is improving very, very quickly as well. So.
But where Craig was going with that database, he completely went somewhere completely left that I wasn't thinking he was going to go. But as far as even something as simple as a database, if you got a serial killer in Florida and he flies to Oregon and then he goes to New York, something of where they can enter exactly how this person was killed. And, only law enforcement have that. And in Florida, they like, okay, it's a match. She was strangled. Her hair was cut, and basically have like a similar database. And then they can try to link some of this together without possibly the public knowing, but just link it together. Okay, he cut a strand of hair out. So this same thing happened in New York. It happened in Georgia. So then you would kind of get a pattern that you're looking for the same individual.
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible. And as you pointed out, Craig, earlier, the civil liberties component of this, how far do you get to go? How far do we allow our officials to go before they infringe on our liberties is going to be a huge debate. How much privacy versus security are we willing to trade and so forth? But I will say this, with the number of cameras that there are in public places, the average American is on camera, I believe it's 22 times a day anymore. Plus everybody has a camera in their pocket. So you go to the ATM, your picture is taken. You're on the highway, your picture is taken. You go to your job, your picture is taken, often without you knowing it. Every retail store you go in. It may well be that, it's going to get harder and harder to be a I hate to use the word successful serial killer. And by successful, I mean undetected. Serial killers are usually caught because they get complacent and they slip up. I mean, that's something that definitely struck me as I was researching this book and writing it. How did they get caught? And very rarely was it simply a piece of bad luck. Quite often, they'd gotten away with it so long, they got sloppy, they got complacent, and that is what ultimately was there undoing.
No, there was a couple, I think, didn't they basically wanted to almost get caught just so they could start getting credit for it. I remember there's a couple where it was just they were not getting credit for the crimes. And so I know the Zodiac killer, even though he hasn't been caught, was one of those where it was getting more and more blatant. Like, I did this, I want the attention, because it's just like they're not giving me my due.
That is common. And one thing I do recall from my days as a firefighter was that on every major fire, if there is a suspicion that an arsonist is at work, a very savvy fire marshal will be watching the crowd, because crowds always gather. Obviously, fires are interesting things to watch, but many arsonists like to watch their handiwork. They take this perverse delight in watching the fire department come in and put out their fire that they caused. They're the center of attention. And so if you see the same faces in different neighborhoods, that's something that a savvy fire marshal will keep an eye on. The desire for publicity and recognition and acknowledgement is very, very inherent. And that's why so many of the serial killers like to taunt the police. Sometimes it's not the killing itself, but the fact that they're able to get one over on the authorities that gives them their kicks.
Yeah, I know everybody wants like the Hollywood version of the serial killer. Those don't really exist. The Hannibal Lecter. I'm trying to remember Kevin Spacey's character in Seven.
Yeah,
that was another great movie. Just where that I think that encompassed like the real psychopathic serial killer, where they have an overall goal in their actions. There's not something where it's like random, like, hey, that person's available, kill. Mm-hmm. No, this one was literally these meet the steps, and then I must complete my my glorious mission.
Well, and most people love a good serial killer movie. So whether it's something like Seven, which is brilliantly plotted and acted, or the Saw movies, which are very popular. Obviously, There's the law of diminishing returns there. But those are the product of Hollywood screenwriting. I do like to tell people you are still far more likely to be murdered by somebody than a stranger who is a serial killer. And reading a book like mine, or writing it even, you start to look at people in a very kind of odd way. You start to think, how innocent is my neighbor? Is that a strange look I got?
I know.
In reality, though, you are far more likely to be the victim of homicide from somebody that and that knows you. So the idea of the serial killer stalking strangers is far more common than the serial killer killing people that they know.
Question: how many serial killers do you actually think, out of all your books that you wrote, that actually have an ulterior motive, like the DC sniper? He was ultimately trying to get back to kill his ex-girlfriend, or it was his baby mama or his ex-girlfriend. So how many serial killers do you think that's actually trying to circle around to kill somebody they really want to kill, but they have to make it look like there is, actually a serial killer, so they can actually kill the person that they want to kill?
So with the caveat that I'm by no means a trained psychologist or psychiatrist, I think they're all doing it for a reason, and that reason always varies. So it's tough to answer that question in any meaningful way. But looking at the difference between them, looking at the sheer variety of reasons, probably the most prolific serial killer we have ever seen, if we discount, people like Caligula that ran empires and stuff. If we're talking about our traditional definition of a serial killer, then you're looking at somebody like Dr. Harold Shipman in the UK. Now, Shipman was a doctor that killed in excess of 200 people. 200. And his motive, well, Shipman was a young man when his mother was on her deathbed, and the local doctor used to come to his house, and he would take his mother's pain away by giving them medications, by giving injections of morphine. And that was why Shipman went to medical school. So he started out with this very, I think, noble goal, What's more noble than that? I want to be the kind of person that took away my mother's pain and help people. And then how did Shipman get from that to giving fatal overdoses of morphine to literally hundreds of people? Well, it seems like he had the characteristics of being a very volatile personality. The people that worked with him said that if you were his peer or a superior to him in the workplace, he would treat you very differently than if he saw you as an underling. So he saw certain people as being beneath him. And those pathologic personality traits were always there. And I think Shipman developed this sense of godhood, this God complex. I have the power of life and death. And today I might kill, and today I might not. So I think a lot of them are not even consciously aware of their motives. They are driven and couldn't quite articulate why if they tried.
Now, so kind of like that too, where you were talking about, where they don't maybe not control it, because you have, how many would you say typically fall under the David Berkowitz, son of Sam, the dog, Sam the dog was telling me who to kill.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard that the devil made me do it defense a lot, right? That seems like a timely point to make, what with the new Conjuring movie coming out in 2 days, and that's the very crux of that movie. The idea that I'm not responsible because this isn't me, it's the dog. This isn't me, it's Satan. This isn't me, it's whatever. I think yes, sure, some of them do hear voices that are telling them to kill. But equally, many of them are using this as an excuse or as a defense, as a card to play. Because I would say, if you made me pick one defining characteristic of serial killers, and I would love to see what people in the chat think about this, but I would put my money on the fact that they are all egotistical and cunning. That combination of ego-driven cunning. Yeah,
and that's kind of, we brought that up last week too. With Mark Olshaker on his book. And that was where me personally, I mean, I hate to be judge, jury type thing, side note there with them finding religion. It's not me to judge who they are, but it seems to me like a lot of them find this not so much as like they truly are repentant, more as this is a one last ditch effort to make sure that the focus comes back on them so they could recount their tales.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, some of them wanted posterity. Holmes definitely was, at the end, that was really all he had left. How am I going to be remembered? How big a mark did I leave? As far as religion goes, I mean, it's interesting that you have people like Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, would do the most horrific things to innocent people, and yet was very high up in his church, was a well-respected member of his church. So how do you have a genuine faith in something like Christianity, and yet you are able to go out and murder entire families? It's I've often come to wonder, when you look at the double lives that these individuals lead, which is the mask and which is the true face? Are they really this monster 24 hours of the day, 7 days a week, that is just really good at acting like an ordinary human being? Or are they ordinary human beings 99% of the time who then flip and become monstrous? Which is the mask and which is really them? And I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, because that's a crux. I mean, because you have some of these people, you can't claim that they're crazy, they're psychotic, because you have somebody like Ted Bundy, a brilliant man. Even defended himself, and you're like, so you can't go to the same business.
I really would. Firstly, there's an old saying in legal circles that a man who represents himself, a lawyer that represents himself has a fool for a client. Yeah, and even then with Bundy, it was about grandstanding. Look at me standing up in front of the jury. Look at me. Richard Ramirez, who we talked about earlier in court, was grandstanding. He was flashing occult symbols. He had a crowd of groupies that came to the court every day. I mean, how does a serial rapist, torturer, murderer get groupies, for goodness sake? And yet it was like Beatlemania with Ramirez when he was in court. So I don't know that Bundy was actually that intelligent. Firstly, if he was, he would have stayed off the radar a lot more.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point. Now, kind of expand on what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think this in the psyche of people, because like you said, you're not a psychologist. I mean, it's hard to just, but from the stuff you see, how Charles Manson, Ted Bundy, Richard Ramirez, you've got these women that this is a guy that is a rapist, kills women, does these things. And not only are they not afraid, they are, I love you. I want to be with you. I want you to be, and it's just, marry me. And you're like, what is it about this that these guys have this hold on some of these females to get them to where it's like Beatlemania?
Yeah, and ordinarily I'd ask myself, are we being sexist here? But I can't think of any instances of female murderers that have this barrage of attention from males. So it does seem to be a uniquely female-male phenomenon. I almost wonder if it isn't the fact that it's a safe thrill for them, that they can claim their celebrity serial killer and know that he's going to be behind bars forever. What's kind of scary is that we as a society have accorded some of these individuals rock star status.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, many of them have seen it that way. Ramirez kind of dressed that way, and I think that one of the things that gave me sleepless nights about writing about serial killers was I did not want them to be admired. I don't. I think they're vile. I think they're appalling excuses for humanity. Some of them I think are subhuman. But they are still worthy of study. But to idolize them, to have them as pinups, to want to marry one, it's a tough circle to square in my mind.
Yeah, the people that walk around with a Richard Ramirez shirt or a Ted Bundy shirt, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you're in de facto like worshiping and giving these guys the celebrity status that they don't deserve. But it's like for anybody that criticizes somebody like yourself for writing these books, it's one of the things. If you don't learn history, you're doomed to repeat it. I mean, if you don't pay attention to, hey, these people have been missing in here. It's like, hey, why don't we start looking at the similarities here and see if we can't figure out who's killing these people?
Well, and there is definitely a way to cover it. And I tried not to make the book salacious. I mean, you can write a biography of Hitler and not advocate or be a fan of Hitler. Hopefully you aren't,
Yeah.
So, but there is still much to be learned about Hitler and why he behaved the way he did. Going back to that tortured childhood thing, I know many historians and psychologists have talked about the fact that many of his issues started with seeing abuse of his mother. I do worry though that we are so obsessed with the serial killer phenomenon. We as a culture, because all of the Western world seems the same way. You can log on to Netflix and see most of the top documentaries are true crime and specifically serial killer related. I hope that our fascination, though, comes from a healthy place, which for many people it does. We want to understand. We don't venerate. Yeah.
No, I agree. I think we talked a little bit prior to the show, and I told you I've really been watching all these shows. And it's not from like, oh my God, is this, but it's more like I find this fascinating how these people got away with this for so long and nobody put this stuff together.
And Mona in the chat has made a great point. It's too bad people don't remember the victims' names. If anyone's going to be remembered, it should be the victim. I mean, having been involved with mass shootings in my own career, I don't want to see the shooter's name and face plastered all over the media. Once it's over, I'm primarily interested in keeping the memory of those good and innocent people alive. That's what we should really focus on.
And the one I've mentioned it here a couple of times, is Confessions of a Serial Killer, and that's the one where I really like this, and I think it's also like Catching a Serial Killer too. And that's what this lady has done is she's actually giving names to these victims and actually finding who they are and giving them what they deserve, to an answer for these families, giving closure to these people. This isn't just a prostitute that was killed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing, one thing that I learned early is I'm a paramedic. And one thing that I learned early in medicine, and I teach all of my own students this, is that there's a real tendency for us in medicine to depersonalize our patients, and it's a defense mechanism. So I might describe somebody as the chest painer in bed 6. And you have to actively remember that the chest painter in bed 6 is John Smith, and he's married, and he's somebody's dad and somebody's son, and he's probably pretty scared right now. And so medical professionals hopefully reach that point where they're still able to be appropriately clinically detached, but you don't depersonalize the person. Serial killers have this ability to completely depersonalize other human beings. They see them more as disposable objects, things to be toyed with, things for their gratification, and their suffering. They have no empathy for the suffering that they inflict, or they actively take joy in the suffering that they inflict.
Yeah, there was one that I'll see if I could find it, because there's another one. It was almost perfectly like what you just said. That was their MO. I mean, you can see they absolutely had complete disregard for anything about the person. It wasn't just like, it was almost like they went out of their way to do this to their victims. And it was pretty, if I can't think of it, I'll get to it. But I teased here, I want to get to you. So you've done several of your haunted, like the Horrors of the Fox Hollow Farm, but you've also done a lot of haunted, like hospitals and haunted healthcare books. And so what really was the first foray where it really got you into going for the paranormal angle, like doing the investigations?
Well, I've been a paranormal investigator for 25 years. I started back in the UK in the mid-90s before I came to the States to live. And I joined the fire department on September 11. That was my way of trying to make some sense out of that awful event. Became an EMT, became a paramedic. And a lot of doctors, nurses, patients, medical staff have strange things happen to them on the job. And it used to be kind of a joke in the hospital that, you had something weird happen to you up on the 4th floor. Well, that ghost guy, the paramedic, will probably be in later. You should tell him your story. And it happened to me enough that I wanted to start writing them down and sharing these stories with others, which is kind of what led to me being asked to do the TV show Haunted Hospitals and Paranormal 911. I find healthcare providers especially to be very good, reliable eyewitnesses, because these are generally people with a scientific background, scientific training. They're skilled observers. And when they're also around death quite a bit. So when they have strange stories to tell, I like to listen, and I like to share them with readers.
So I haven't seen one of those books yet. What would you say is one of the craziest experiences in the hospital that you could just off the top of your head? It's like, this one really stuck with me, that we encountered.
The one that actually stuck with me the most, it wasn't that it was crazy, Craig, but it was that it touched my life personally. Because I was asked to go sit with a young man who was dying, who was terminally ill with cancer. And his name was Kyle Stolmack. And I was supposed to go hang with Kyle for a couple of hours, sign some books for him. His dad had said that he was seeing the ghosts of other children that he had been through cancer treatment with and that had since passed on. And that they were telling him that he was about to die pretty soon. And everything was going to be okay. And he wanted some reassurance that he wasn't, hallucinating or going mad or anything like that this was a real experience. So I sat with him, and he became pretty much my best friend. And I kept going back and hanging out with Kyle, and he taught me a lot of things about my own life. Now he and I talked about ghosts and his paranormal experiences. The cancer had eaten into the side of his face and was immensely painful. And one night he's in bed, and 2 very tall glowing figures walked into his room, didn't disturb anybody else in the house, his mom, his dad, or his sister. One of them touched him on the side of the face and instantly made the pain go away. And this figure said that the 3rd time would be the final time. Now, this was Kyle's 3rd time with cancer. He'd beaten it twice, and the doctors had said that it had gotten into his lungs and it was unlikely, very unlikely, that he was going to be able to defeat it again. And Kyle made sure that he kept extensive notes. He wanted to make sure that he was not deluding himself. So he noted the times of these encounters. He noted that he was not on medications at the time. He was his own skeptical investigator. I love this kid.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it absolutely was. But the main thing he taught me was that this kid complained less, and he had a terminal illness, than I did after a day at work. He taught me to be grateful. He taught me how to die with dignity. And he was just an incredible human being. So I wrote his story up and I put it, it's the last section of my book, Haunted Healthcare, and I wanted to share his story with the world. And, you know, this kid suffered so much, had these very strange encounters, but the real important aspect of those encounters was not the paranormal nature of them. It was the connection that he and I made and the friendship we got out of it. And Kyle just broke my heart when he died, and I think of that guy every day.
That's an amazing story, because that's kind of what I was getting at. You know, crazy was just like a sensationalist term, I guess, but it was just that was the thing.
That's what he said too. These are crazy experiences, man. You know, he was right there with you. But this kid was made an honorary Navy SEAL. He had like a sniper's ghillie suit that the SEAL team had sent him. You know, cool. He was a wonderful, I call him a kid. He was 21, 22. And yeah, incredible story. And the paranormal brought us together. And I'm real proud to call him my best friend.
That's an amazing story. I said everybody, for what we were just talking about there, you know, haunted healthcare. I mean, if anything, go buy that book just to, you know, not only just in honor of, you know, that story. I mean, that is an amazing thing, because not many people can have that personal connection when they're doing these type of things. And that's, wow, I'm blown away by that story.
Well, you know, something I'd love to tell you as well is, if you watch my show, if you watch Haunted Hospitals, those kind of shows are by intent. You know, they're creepy. They cover a lot of creepy stories. The vast majority of the healthcare stories that I've heard are very positive ones. They're very enlightening ones. They're ones that would, rather than cause fear, would actually do the very opposite. There is a lot of reason for hope because of some of those stories. And it has convinced me that we do live on after we die, and that the possibility of interacting with those who have passed, it's more common than most people think, is what I'll say. A lot of hospitals have their ghosts and their ghost stories. I've talked to doctors in the UK. I've talked to doctors across the US and Canada, and many of them tell the same sorts of stories, as do the patients, as do the nurses. There's a commonality to all of this, which makes me think it's a real phenomenon rather than some big collective delusion.
And that definitely makes sense too, because like I said, there doesn't seem to be like much to where you'd have a lot of negativity, a lot of, you know, basically just evil spirit, especially like in a hospital, because most of these things is going to be dwelling in sadness, lost a loved one. You're going to have something like that. They're looking around trying to pass on, and you're not going to have this. There's actually, I mean, the psychiatric hospital side, you know, that hospital side, you're going to have probably a lot more of a completely different experience between that hospital environment than, yeah.
Absolutely.
No, other than that, and you had a couple, I apologize, I don't, my notes, I forgot to write it down. You have a couple of TV shows too, right, that you have been involved in? Yeah,
just 4 or 5 of them. I do Haunted Hospitals, Haunted Case Files, Paranormal 911, Paranormal Night Shift, and later this year, Destination Fear for an episode or 2. But as much as I enjoy TV work, books are where it's at for me. I have a great face for the keyboard, as my wife will tell you.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's the old joke. You know, it's like a face for radio and a voice for print. You know, is what we have.
Exactly.
And so just kind of show everybody. It's like he was talking about. It's like you've been busy. I mean, you really have. You know, and this is richardestep.net for anybody. You just go there, click right on the books, brings you right here, shows blog, gives you about information, contact. It's, you know, the story. I mean, there's a few of them I'm really interested in getting in. Some of the, like I said, the Horrors of Fox Hollow Farm. That one looks really intriguing. I said I'm probably gonna pick that one up and get you reading on that one.
That definitely is. That's the Venn diagram where true crime, serial killers, and the paranormal meet, because it was that kind of case. And that book is what started me down the road to writing this book about serial killers. It was my first real interaction with a case which involved a serial murderer. And, you know, it's one thing to read police records. It's another to swim in the pool where the serial killer murdered his victims. And to sit at his desk and to go through his books and see his handwriting on the shelf. And it was definitely a very eye-opening experience.
Yeah, and while you're on that type thing, do you find that has almost? Do you feel like it has a negative effect for you, where like it really takes you a little bit to get past? Like if you're crime scene photos everywhere, you're going through all this stuff. Do you feel like something of that kind of lingers with you, and it takes a little while for you to get that out of your system?
I've seen a lot of death because of my profession, and continue to. And you know, you don't just see death, but you smell it. You're around it quite often, and violence and things of that nature. I don't care who you are. Nobody ever depersonalizes. Nobody healthy anyway is ever able to depersonalize it to the point where it doesn't bother. If you're able to reach that point in your life where this stuff doesn't bother you, then you should either seek help or go do something else, you know? So it can be difficult. I mean, as fascinating as serial killers are, after spending over a year researching and writing that book, I wanted to go do something different. And I felt like I needed to give my brain a bath, you know, to shower some of the ick off. And I'm grateful to the people that helped me with that book. I mean, my wife, Laura, proofed it. And she said, this is a great book and it's awful. My friend India, who also gave me extensive notes and helps me with the research. My friend Linda that also read it. These are serial killer aficionados, and they're familiar with this kind of stuff too. But I think everybody has to step away from this once in a while and just appreciate that we are dealing with real human beings here whose lives ended in the worst possible ways, and we should take a moment at least to appreciate them and empathize with them and remember them.
Yeah, exactly. Because stuff like, I can only imagine like what you go through, like looking at Ed Gein, like his stuff, like, you know, when you see these type of things, like how somebody can just decompartmentalize and just set that aside, you know, without it affecting you. Just know, because for me, that's always been when I see somebody, it's kind of weird. I look at them, I don't really picture like, oh, it's just another person. I just, as we're driving down the road, I'll think about the car next to me. This is another person that's doing the same thing. They're driving to some destination. They got the family. They got their problems. You've got all these things. And you could spend a while just thinking about this whole other world that just drove past you.
Sure. And it's interesting, depending on what your vocation is, you look at people in a different way. I mean, you know, probably I'm not going to fill you with joy when I tell you, Craig, but I look at you right now and you seem like a nice guy. My professional brain is saying, if I have to breathe for this guy and put a bag valve mask over his face, that beard's going to cause me a real problem. I also, this is kind of a horrible thing, but I also meet new people, and without meaning to, I'm scoping out their veins. Like if I ever meet you and you think I'm checking you out like that, I'm not. Yeah. I'm actually looking at your AC veins and your hands, and I'm thinking, if I had to get an IV, that's probably where I would go. It's a professional thing. When I was a firefighter, I used to walk into the grocery store, and you would think, if I'm stretching a line in here, if I'm pulling a hose line in here, I think in multiples of 50 feet. How much hose do I need to drag to fight a fire at the back of the store?
And I know right here.
Yeah, absolutely. The AC.
Yeah, you're right there. That's a good one. Yep.
You know, I'm sure mechanics look at people's cars that way. You know. I know that people that went to film school can't look. My wife went to film school. She cannot watch a movie without finding all the continuity problems with it. I'll be engrossed in the movie, and she'll say, that glass of water was full, and now it's half full, and then it's 2/3 full. Continuity errors. It bugs her. She reads it like a job.
Yep.
You kind of change the way you look at people, I think, based on what your vocation is in life.
It's like the military, like special forces guys that watch the military movies, and it just drives them crazy when you see some guy, like the way that they've got everything laid out. They're like, no, we would never go into something, set up like that.
Yeah, we'd never be that bunched up that we would all be in one camera shot.
Exactly.
To piggyback off what you said a little bit, for the guests that don't know, the the dead body smell is like you would think, okay, it smells like an animal. No, that eerie smell of dead people is like crazy. I used to work for a funeral home, so it's a smell that you can't get out of your head. You smell it, you're like, oh, somebody's dead.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I don't know if it's your body breaking down chemical enzymes and stuff, but your body gives off a odor that you'll never forget.
Absolutely. And I remember distinctly the first time I ran a cardiac arrest, which was years ago now, many years ago, but I kept smelling it all day and all night. And I swear that I was, even after a shower, I would keep smelling it. Like it was coming out of my pores, which it's not like I bathed in the dead person, but it's one of those things. Strength is such a strong sense, a strong sensation. Very visceral, isn't it? Smell can take you right back when an image might not. We've all smelled that thing that takes us back instantly to our childhood, and it's like that, which you don't get with necessarily a sight or a sound.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, as like I said, just look at the time. We're running out of time here. But yeah, everybody need to go to richardestep.net and check these books. Each one of these, like I said, you can go right to it. I think most of these are, if not all of them, are easily available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can pick those up. There's even, if you look on a site here, I'll bring it back up for everybody. When you click on a book, it'll take you right here to the link, and just all you have to do is just go here and you can click right here, Amazon.com. Boom. There's also a link for Amazon.com in UK. Takes you right there. You can buy that book.
If they
make sure you also follow him. Follow like this. Say click. That's all you got to do.
If they want a signed copy, do you have plates you send out, or you package and ship some books out yourself?
So yeah, what I do is in the US, I do mail order signed copies every usually 6 weeks to 2 months. And for overseas readers, I'll mail out book plates because I'm a big book person. Like, this is my office. Somebody asked me what's on my walls. Like, my library of books is kind of right over there, and I have a basement full of books. I'm a collector of books. I really appreciate a book. Much as I love my Kindle and the idea that I can have 1,000 books in my pocket, I love a signed book. So I do make book plates available for people that want them. I just ask that they cover postage is all. And for somebody that asked earlier, they're on Audible too for the most part.
Yeah, and that's what you're saying. There is something about physically holding on to a book.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing it here, it's like you can flip through your phone, but just for me, it's always, there's nothing quite like reading a book and falling asleep and having it smack you in the face. It just, you don't get that with your phone.
For me, as someone that writes them, there's no feeling on it. I finished a book literally yesterday. No, I lied to you. It was Monday. I lost track of the days. And it was a military history book, which is for Visible Ink Press, the guys that just publish serial killers. And I thought it was pretty fitting to finish an American military history book on Memorial Day, And it's 102,000 words, which it's just a big computer file. But when you hold it in your hands, when you actually have that book and the weight of it, all of those hours you put into it and all of the editing and re-editing and all of the sweat and the frustration of trying to find the right phrase seems worth it when you hold a physical book.
Yep. And that's, like I said, and that's the thing. Just like everybody, what's what we've been talking about, serial killers, the minds, methods, and mayhem of history's most notorious murders. And I said
I keep getting asked if that's me on the cover as well. And it's not.
Oh, that right there?
No, that's on the front cover.
Oh, the one right there. Yeah, this.
Jeffrey Dahmer's on the back cover.
Oh my God! No, he's not Dahmer. Yeah, no,
definitely not.
No, that's all. Well, Richard, I really appreciate you coming on the show. This is fantastic. We'd love to have you down the road at some point. Kind of follow up, and especially as you got. Do you have anything to tease? Like, might be upcoming, like the serial killers part 2.
Right, that would be cool, wouldn't it? So yeah, I just did sign with Visible Ink to do a sequel to Serial Killers 2. It's going to be a similar format because I've heard that people really enjoy the way this book is laid out, but we are looking at a slightly more specific angle on serial killers, a more specific theme, because we think there could probably be a series. If the books continue to do well, I'd like to continue to write them. But what I'd love to do, Craig, is thank everybody in the chat, because I saw a lot of great interaction in there, a lot of great comments, and stuff that's been thought-provoking. So thank you for being engaged and listening to us and speaking to us tonight, guys. It's been a real pleasure to virtually meet you all.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we love having you on here. So we'll definitely have to do it again, especially, as we go down the run, if we don't get to you before, definitely when part 2 comes out. Definitely want to have that. So tell the family, thank you for, and we'll talk Legos and nerd stuff one of these times too, because I have a whole nother, I could turn it around, to make everybody dizzy, but I've got a whole wall of Star Wars and Legos and everything on the back.
Oh, cool.
Wall. Yeah. So it's what I could probably, it's probably too dark. People can't see it, so I won't do it.
I'm working on that big Star Destroyer right now. It's been on my table for months.
Oh yeah, those ones where it's just, you see it's almost daunting task because you're pouring out you just open the box, you're like, it can't be too bad, and it just seems like a never-ending cascade of plastic bags comes flowing out, and you're just
although it's exactly like writing a book in that it's one brick at a time, one sentence at a time. People ask me, how do you write as many books as you do? And it's it sounds flippant, but one sentence at a time. And how do you build a 5,000 piece Millennium Falcon one brick at a time?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. If you don't mind, send us a picture when it gets done with you. I'd love to. We'll post it up on the page and stuff like show it off, because that's definitely a labor intensive set to put together.
Oh, that it is. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, take care. Have a great night, and we'll be in touch.
Appreciate you all.
All right.
Good night,
everybody. That was Richard Estep. Appreciate him coming in. This show is brought to you by Nanny Cakes. And let's see, we're gonna try this out here. Hey, there we go. Nanny Cakes, 407-923-2898 is phone number, or Nanny Cakes 407 on Facebook. And check her out. Mention us, Three Beards. You're going to save 15% off on your cake order here in the Central Florida area. Check us out on social media, threebeardspodcast.com. Maybe kick some stuff over there for Chris, who's vaping, apparently making some noise there, sir. Help him out with this. Give him some money, get him the new vape flavor there. As he's choking to death. All right, everybody, we are rebroadcast on Xena Radio app, the Patriot Radio, rebroadcast every Thursday night at 10 p.m. Go check them out, courtesy of JJ Beard Co. Go thank them for doing that. We appreciate them rebroadcasting us there. Everybody, if we could do just a favor, go to YouTube, follow, and subscribe, please. That's kind of like the push here. We're really trying to get the subscribers up. That seems silly, seems small, but that does us a huge favor. Go to Three Beards Podcast on YouTube and just subscribe for us. We would really appreciate and follow the show. Everybody, thank you for watching. We had a great time. Go to richardestep.net. Support him. Buy, for sure, the Serial Killers book, and also the one that we talked about, I think it was Haunted Hospital. I think it was, apologize here. Check that one out, so that way support him, especially with that amazing story. Haunted Healthcare, this one, Haunted Healthcare. Support him for that one. And everybody, thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Good night.